My name is Candace Powell-Kynard, and I am the owner of EduDreamer Consulting and on the leadership team for College Prep Roundtable, one of the charter members going back many, many years when I was 10. So today's topic is a really good one, and I really think that you all are going to want to clear your desk off, take some serious notes, really dig into this topic. And I'm going to tell you a little story just to introduce it. Young man goes to high school, works with his counselors, gets an amazing scholarship to a state university. Probably close to 80%, maybe close to 90% of his bill was paid, ready to go. In July, before college starts, he receives a notice that he is required to have his health care forms completed. This young man panics. He does not have a doctor. His family doesn't see doctors regularly. He has no idea how he's going to get this required health care form filled out. He calls the university to tell them he cannot attend. He did not know what to do. He did not know who to call. He did not know that that could be resolved pretty easily and pretty quickly. And if it wasn't for the fact that he actually shared that story with someone, he probably would not have gone. But literally at the last hour, the first week of September, he was caught by someone who, he shared that story with, and they were able to get him reinstated because he withdrew. I'm introducing that story because that's a definition of summer melt. Something so easily resolvable, right, that could have really thrown him, and had he not had some intervention, would not have been in college. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very excited to introduce to you Ms. Stephanie Fiorelli, who we are really excited about. You're going to love her energy, and she's going to dig into this topic of summer melt with us. Stephanie?
Well, thank you, Candace, and thank you, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Hey, Shamik, I'm going to share my screen. So yeah, today we're going to talk about summer melt, what it is, why it's happening, and what we'll do. So here's the agenda for today. I'm going to talk just very briefly about who I am, and we're going to get into some definitions and data about summer melt. We'll move into some bigger lifts, some significant solutions, like bridge programs, transition workshops, and whatnot. But then we're going to move into sort of the smaller but still important solutions, things that you can start doing right now to prevent summer melt. So who the heck am I? Is a question I ask myself quite a bit. So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. And when I graduated high school, I applied to one college that was 20 minutes away. I liked reading and writing, so I studied English and creative writing. And when I graduated, I had zero idea how I was going to find a job. So I worked at my mom's daycare for a year. And then because I still didn't know what else to do, I returned to school, got my master's in English, started teaching college writing. I founded and edited a literary magazine, and then kind of started doing some academic advising work for TRIO Student Support Services. And that's actually when I learned the term first gen. And honestly, suddenly not only did my aimlessness in college make sense, but also I finally felt that I had now found a career path. So after my husband and I moved to New York City, I started working more intentionally in alumni spaces. So I helped Democracy Prep launch their alumni program. I stayed there for a few years and then eventually landed at the Urban Assembly, which is where I've been for a little over 6 years. And now I'm here talking to you guys about summer melt. So those of us who've been working with high school seniors or in higher education for years probably already knew that some students were not actually arriving on college campuses, even when they seemed certain in June or July that they wanted to. So maybe 10, 20 years ago, there wasn't really a name to this phenomenon. But 10 years ago, Ben Castleman and Lindsay Page published a really great results from a longitudinal study that revealed that 10 to 20% of college intending students did not matriculate in the fall. They melted away over the summer. And so since then, lots of organizations have been addressing summer melt. Orgs were addressing it before, obviously, but this study certainly just put the problem on the map. Especially when Castleman and Page pointed out that up to 40% of students from low-income homes who plan to attend community college melted away. Now, this melting might not be a big problem, right? After all, maybe these kids will matriculate in 1 or 2 years after high school graduation, but the research has been pretty clear on that too. If students from low-income homes don't attend college directly from high school, they are very unlikely to go at all. Or if they do go, they're less likely than their direct enrollment counterparts to complete a degree. And this is actually something I'm going to return to in a minute. So the question becomes, why do they melt? If we can figure out why they melt, maybe we can address their needs and solve the problem. As you know, there's a variety of steps students need to take in order to confirm their matriculation to college. Candace talked about, put that in a really great story in the beginning. It involves a lot of paperwork and accounts and portal creation. So the first reason is the sheer number of steps they need to complete just to be able to land on their college campus. I've been working with students during the summer after high school graduation, and I can tell you that our team at the Urban Assembly has almost 50 milestones we walk students through in order to get onto campus. Now, not all these milestones involve paperwork or accounts or portals, but many of them do. And can you imagine how many emails students have to sift through? And we all know kids have multiple email addresses nowadays, which just exacerbates the communication problems. They also have a hard time remembering all their login information, no matter how much we tell them to put their passwords in a safe place. In any case, these matriculation steps are really big barriers, but let's be real, this is a problem because paperwork, accounts, portals, they're all spread across lots of different entities that tend not to speak to each other, right? So financial aid, registrars, student life. The financial aid office doesn't necessarily know whether or not you've registered for classes or that you've submitted your housing forms. So, the second reason our kids melt is because higher ed continues to be siloed. And finally, when they leave high school, they have no one next to them to guide their way. Most of our kids don't have parents in the home who attended college, and many don't even have friends or family members who did. They no longer have their high school counselor. And, even if they had been set up with a CBO or nonprofit, we have to remember it's summertime and you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes students actually think they're all set. So even if they had access to support, why would they use it? And then in August, they get a bill in the mail from their college. Why do I have a bill? Thinking, I did the FAFSA, this should all be straightened out. And of course, what's likely happened is their aid hasn't deposited yet. So it shows up in the bursar's office as a bill for first semester's tuition. And again, because they don't have anyone to turn to, or because they're embarrassed to ask for help, they do nothing. And what's so frustrating is that, we say that these kids melt, but really it's the support around them that's melting, not them. And this melt is actually happening everywhere, not just the summer before college. Of the 87% of students who graduate high school, only about 66% will attempt college. About half of them will actually earn a degree. And if you do the rough math, for every 100 students who start high school, Less than 30 will earn a degree. So just take a minute to scan this graph. It disaggregates college completion by institution type. Completion rates for community college students, represented in gray here, have always been historically low. And here you can see that only 42% of kids who enroll in community college earn a degree in 6 years. We have really not done enough to help these students, especially when you compare this group to those who are attending private, nonprofit four-year institutions, whose 6-year graduation rate currently sits at about 78%. And, when I say we, I'm not talking about you awesome people in the room. You do this work every day. I'm talking about we as an education community, including higher education. We talk so much about students being college ready, but I'm pretty sure what needs to happen is that colleges need to be student ready. But of course, maybe that's a topic for another time. The pandemic has precipitated a decline in college enrollment. So it kind of makes you wonder, right? If less kids are now attending college, does that mean even more are melting? And before I get into this data, I'm going to give you another minute to review it. I want to draw your attention to the low-income high schools. For this population, community colleges have seen a near 20% drop in enrollment. And in fact, enrollment for all institutions across the board has declined, even for higher income high schools. I mentioned earlier that students who take a gap year are less likely to enroll in college at all. And if they do enroll, they're less likely to earn a degree. According to a national post-secondary student aid study, students who take a gap year are half as likely to earn a bachelor's degree. And, there are lots of reasons for this. Kids often lose academic momentum, and that's especially hard if you live in a home where your parents didn't attend college. And, while this is happening, real world expenses are continuing to accumulate, often even if you do have a job. And to boot, if you land on a campus after that gap year, a lot has been happening during that time you chose to stay away. So, you can feel like you've totally missed out on certain things. So there's definitely an advantage if students can push through those first rough summer months and make it to their college campus. It's why support during the summer after high school is so important. So what have some organizations, districts, and schools been doing to address this melt? So first, I'm going to run through 3 solutions that are bigger lifts. They're bigger lifts because they require systems change, which, as we know, is not always easy. Before I get into these solutions, though, I do want to pause. Does anyone have questions about the material or the data that I just covered? Okay. Thanks, Shanique. Always so positive. The best way to address summer melt, and maybe I'm biased because I run a summer bridge program at the Urban Assembly, is to build a summer bridge program that uses peer leads as change makers, right? There's a lot of research that points to the benefits of peer leaders. Students are way more likely to confide and take advice from people their age who are also currently going through the same problems they are. So what typically happens is a school will hire recent high school graduates who currently attend college to coach in their high schools from May to August. These coaches help seniors with the critical paperwork and tasks that need to be completed for college matriculation. They grow a relationship with the students while they're still in high school, and that relationship sustains them in July and August as they continue to work their way towards campus. Another thing you can do is to offer transition workshops. These typically take place during the spring of senior year, during some kind of like advisory period during school, or in some cases after school. Transition workshops cover not only the transactional things that kids need to complete for college, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they cover things like how to talk to your professor, or how to network, or what to expect on a PWI campus. And the way I've run these in the past is to create case studies that help students see what's likely to happen to them on a college classroom or a college campus. And it's particularly impactful for seniors if alumni themselves have written these case studies, and even more if you can convince or preferably pay alumni to help you run the actual transition workshops. Speaking of alumni, alumni are always on my mind. You can also prevent summer melt by holding alumni panels. Invite current college students into your classrooms. Better yet, invite them into a larger space like an auditorium so they can speak to the entire school. It's never too early to have these kinds of conversations. You know, you want to get students and leadership in the room together to hear the real stories about college life so you can learn from their experiences, ask questions, and just get advice. It's also a great opportunity for your alumni. They can put this experience on their resume and grow their public speaking skills. But how do you convince leadership that these big lifts are worth it? Again, this is a webinar in and of itself. I've already counted at least 3 or 4 new webinars that I can produce from this. But what I'll just say quickly now is, first you appeal to their mind, right? Bring them data, come to leadership with an actual plan of action, make the change seem inevitable, right? I might as well do it. It's pretty much done already. But then you've got to appeal to their heart, right? Because when they see things and hear stories for themselves from alumni, that's really when you get, when they're most likely to change their minds. But sometimes we just don't have the capacity to do any of these things, let alone convince a hesitant leader to change. It's hard to find time to organize an alumni panel, and even getting classroom space can be difficult. And forget about trying to launch an entire bridge program. Schools barely have enough money to pay for books and supplies. So we're going to kind of pivot to some of the smaller yet still significant things we can do right now to prevent summer melt. And just as a way into that conversation, and because I feel like I've been talking way too much already, I would just like to ask you, what post-secondary access milestones do you help your seniors reach during senior year? And if you don't work directly with students, maybe the question to ask yourself is, what access milestones must seniors reach before they land on a college campus? So you can either come off mute or you can share in the chat, and I'll take a look at the chat while you're doing that.
Stephanie, I'm going to warm up the room and throw something in while people are thinking, right? So in my work in the past, and I'll bring it forward, but in my work in the past, it was critical that we actually had a location open over the summer that people could come to. So when school is closed and counselors are not paid to do summer work, and buildings typically are closed unless they've been turned into a community building within the school district. Yep. It's very difficult for students to figure out where to go. So I've been associated with organizations that were open over the summer. Fast forwarding to the work that I'm doing now, we're forging relationships with schools and counselors and principals to say, give us a day. Just give us, if you can't afford to open up, long term over the summer, give us one day over the summer where we can, invite students in to get all their stuff done. And people are warming up to the idea because they really haven't spent any time thinking about the fact that students are not going in the fall. I'm running into that all the time. It seems to be surprising.
Yeah. And then the question becomes, if you only have them for that one day, what are those few milestones that you're like, I gotta at least get them to do this, that, and the other thing, right? There's gotta be like a few that are like really important. I'm seeing in the chat, FAFSA, college deposit, yes. And that's another thing that trips up kids, because like some of them don't realize you can get like a waiver, or you can advocate for yourself. College placement testing, that is a good one. Yes. Health records, books and materials for first semester class. I remember, a lot of our students didn't realize that they had to get their own books and materials, right? Like that's provided for you in high school. And again, like if you don't have someone telling you, you're going to show up and suddenly be surprised that, oh man, now I got to figure this out, right? So yeah, books and materials are a good one. Placement testing, registration, move in. Oh God, if you're living on campus, that's a whole other set of issues.
Steph,
Yeah.
can I just jump? For everybody that's here, I graduated from Rutgers University blah, 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 many years ago, and that whole like going on campus, it was super exciting to go away from home, but I never I'd never done a campus visit or anything like that, and just to put it into context, I showed up to campus with 5 plastic bags and a duffel bag. That's literally what I showed up to campus with. And as I walked off the public bus system, because I took the train, New Jersey Transit, and then I took the public bus and I walked up to campus, the vision of vans and station wagons, for those of you that are old enough to know what station wagons are, with people moving in stereo systems and
Oh man,
and entire California closet unit, like that some people turn around and walk away and don't come back from that, because they're just like, wait, no, I can't do this, right? Like just that. And so I'm just want to put that out there, but continue, please.
No, I mean, that's true. I mean, one thing, imposter syndrome is real, I mean, like those are the moments that I remember, I remember I used to, again, this is going back to the first gen thing. Like, I grew up in a home and we talked about like sports and food, right? So the interesting words that I was learning, I learned from reading them. And so I never had to really say certain words out loud. And in college, you're having to do a lot of reading or whatever. I remember feeling like such an idiot because I didn't know how to pronounce half of the words that I actually knew in my head. And in those moments, I'm like, why am I even here? Everyone knows what the heck is going on, right? And it goes back to like, if you're trying to move in, you're seeing all these people with their families and their expensive cars. It's like, maybe I'm not supposed to be here, right? We talk about that actually in a lot of the transition workshops that we do, and we train our bridge coaches to have those conversations with students to let them know, like, you deserve to be here, period, right? So thank you guys for sharing. I'll just move on now to these kind of smaller, but still super important solutions for summer melt. One thing you can do right now is learn what milestones you need to start tracking and leading students towards. And I know NCAN is going to give you guys a great checklist for that later on today, but it's even more important to know the ones most likely to trip up students. So these are just 6 really big ones, the ones I've found that impede the students the most from entering college. And I tried to choose ones you might not have considered. Part of the reason these tasks don't get done is that students aren't checking their emails, and often emails and texts are coming to them from all over the place, right? Imagine how like kids are being asked for stuff all the time. It becomes overwhelming, right? And then they don't know what to trust, what email to trust, what not to trust. Is it spam? But if you tell your students in advance what to look out for, or better yet, if you have the capacity to sit down with them and find what they need in their inbox, you can put a plan together for how they're going to get these things. For example, the last 3 here, seem simple, just some forms to complete and send off. Candace referenced this earlier, but some kids don't have their immunizations. Some don't even have doctors. So how are they supposed to know how to solve this problem, right? What office do they call? What if they don't have health insurance? Is there someone on the college campus who can help? Is there a form for that too? You know, and you think it's easy to send off a transcript, but the transcript also has to be official, and it's got to come from your high school. And often kids don't even get their diplomas at graduation if they're in summer school or if they have fines, right? So now what? What if their college is requiring not only an official transcript, but a copy of their diploma? Who's in the school building during the summertime to help them? And college, college class registration, how are kids supposed to know what to sign up for when the registrar is not talking to the financial aid office? What if some of these classes you're telling me to take aren't covered by financial aid? And what if I don't have Wi-Fi at home? How am I supposed to register for classes? And what if I need to make a change, right? Who do I call at the college for that? The last pothole, and the biggest one in some cases, and I kind of don't even want to get into this because it gives me agita to even talk about, is financial aid verification. Honestly, I just don't even know where to start with this one. As some of you guys know, maybe all of you guys know, after the FAFSA is completed successfully, colleges will select some students to provide additional documents to verify the information on the FAFSA. They say this is random, maybe it is, but in my experience, most of our students from low-income homes are selected for verification. So much so, actually, that we tell our bridge coaches to just assume their students have been selected for verification. So once a student is selected, the college will notify them through email, and they'll have to provide a variety of tax and other documents to verify the information that they had entered into their FAFSA. Even if students realize, which they often don't, that they were selected for verification, they often have no idea where to find these documents. And usually when they ask their parents for help finding them, parents become skeptical, right? Remember, it's not easy for someone who didn't attend college and maybe who's working a couple jobs and maybe who's undocumented to just hand over tax information. So even if they try to get these documents, students often can't. And then, of course, you have the group of students who aren't checking email at all regularly, don't realize they've been selected for verification. And like I said in an earlier example, they suddenly get a bill in the mail, or worse, they show up on campus. And we've seen this unfortunately happen every single year. They land on campus only to find out they've been disenrolled because their aid didn't deposit and their bill is outstanding. So anyway, the point is that these are, a series of potholes and, that many students just won't recover from. In addition to knowing these potholes, you can also prevent summer melt by just staying connected to people. The people you encounter at meetings, conferences, places like this, happy hours, they may hold the answers and the keys you need to unlock problems for future students. So stay connected to people in your field who do this work on different sides of the fence. So if you're a counselor and meet someone at a conference who's in financial aid, get their info, follow up every now and again to keep that tie with them. This person might save you and your students a ton of time when you have a complex question about financial aid appeals, for example. You just never know who you're going to need. So it's really important to keep those connections with your weak ties. Actually, there's a ton of research on the strength of weak ties. A woman, Julia Freeman Fisher, has written a book and a few great articles on this. I'll put a link actually in the chat if you're interested. It's really, really, it's really great research. Let's see, chat.
Stephanie, I do want to go back to a question that Barbara asked about adults melting, right? And so they have lots of reasons to melt too. That whole just confidence to go back as an adult thing from the door is big. Any thoughts, or anyone else too, if you want to share in the chat, if you have strategies and what you're seeing, but any thoughts on adult stuff?
do you mean adults who are going back to school melting, or the adults, the support around the students melting?
Well, yeah, that's happening too, but I think Barbara's notion was the adults going back to school. And Barbie, please clarify if we've got that wrong.
Yeah, either going back to school, or for adults that are working adults that haven't been in school for a long time and are going, and they sign up. And the program that I work with do not offer summer classes. So they may have registered in March or April or February and said they're going in September. And then even, you can try to keep in touch with them, but they might have the summer off and thought, wow, this is great to have the summer off. Why am I going back to school?
Yeah, I mean, like, summertime is real. And like, if you're an adult, even more things get in the way and there become more excuses not to go, right? I know what a lot of organizations, colleges in particular, because right, it's hard for colleges because they lose that money. A lot of them have started texting campaigns. We have this at the Urban Assembly too. Again, maybe I'm biased, but they really work well to keep students, whether they're young or older, engaged and excited about the process, right? And that's part of it, is like these text messages are, they're much more likely to get seen than emails. And they not only can text out reminders for FAFSA, verification, whatever it is, but they can keep you excited about that. Because, if you're 25, 30 and have a kid and a job, it might seem like a great idea to go to college, but then life gets in the way and, you find reasons not to. So, if colleges can find a way to stay connected and engaged with the potential students, that's really a way to prevent melt too. Any other questions?
Real quick, Stefan and Candace, Barb, I dropped in the chat earlier in response to the question, buddy system, right? So connecting or peer system where you have students who are more established that are working with the new students, right? So if you have new adults that are coming in, to have established students kind of reach out and connect and kind of make sure they answer all the questions, things like that. That's something that's a little bit more one-on-one. But also the groups, one can kind of preview the Posse Foundation, and you can kind of like adopt that model to your program. And then what happens is if you have groups of adults that are going back to a particular campus or a particular program, you can group them together as a posse. It's like, okay, you guys can keep tabs on each other, and then have point of contacts at your organization, connect with those posses to make sure that they're like keeping tabs on each other, because together everyone achieves more. So just a couple of additional supports and ideas.
Yeah. And it goes back to what I said earlier about like colleges being more student ready, because like that's something that we do a lot in high schools, right? Like my son goes to a school when he started as a 9th grader, he had a buddy or, peer mentor who was in 12th grade. I think we have to get creative like that on college campuses. Education isn't the same anymore. Things have changed. So stuff that maybe worked 30 years ago isn't working now. Kids are really different now than, I'm a like diehard Gen Xer, right? And I'm very different than my millennial counterparts and definitely my Gen Z counterparts. So what I needed in college is not necessarily what they need. And it's because society has changed and our young people have changed. They expect different things. They grow up around different things. And so I really think that, higher ed does have to kind of like come to the table and figure out how to set up these systems, whether it's a buddy system or whatever, to really be intentional with how we're helping our kids land onto college campuses. If we think it's that important to earn a degree, help the kids get there, right? So, I think too, I talk about this all the time. I think young people aren't sure what kind of help they need, right? And, this is one problem, but another, which is a more deep-rooted adaptive challenge, is that even when they do recognize they need help, they often don't ask for it. You know, if we could just convince kids to ask for help when they needed it, we really would be on our way to increasing college enrollment and completion. You know, in my opinion, it's our job as the adults to show them how to seek out help, because it's this one skill, knowing who's got the answers you need, that's going to help them navigate post-secondary life, right? So what I want to say is you prepare students for post-secondary navigation and you prevent summer melt when you model asking for help. Do this in emails, in texts, and whenever you're talking to them. The more they can hear that you need help too, the more this behavior gets normalized and the more comfortable they'll be asking for help when they need it. Now, of course, this does not happen overnight, but over time, I think it will sink in. So just take a look at this email. It's something that I wrote to a student. It just says, I'm kind of in a pinch. I was supposed to present at a conference next week, but the alum who was supposed to present with me had an emergency. Any chance you can help me out? I can fill you in on the details on the phone. So a few things I want to point out with my language choice. I'm explicitly saying I'm in a pinch and I need you. And I think I chose to write, can you help me out, rather than would you be able to come with me, right? It's a really small but important change. You want to use the word help, the actual word, often. And so here's an example of doing it through text. So not only here am I admitting that I need this help, but I'm acknowledging that Jaden has helped me before and I still need more help, right? I'm just going to give you a second to read it. And here's just a few examples of how you can model asking for help when just talking to kids. And I'll give you a second to read some of these. I think you want to admit that you don't know and show them how to do it, right? Because while doing so, you'll certainly fail along the way. And, you know, that's important for them to see too. The food banks one, the second one here is a good example, right? Because you're not just giving the information to the student, but you're explaining how you got the information, and you're indirectly modeling the exact behavior you want from them when they're in college. And then the last one, you know, kids deliver on pieces of information all the time, right? So take a second, press on it, pause on it, and ask, you know, how did you get that information? You know, how did you get it? Where'd you find it? Things like that. And again, like, talk explicitly about that process. But honestly, if there's one thing you take away from today, it is this: we need to normalize asking for help. You know, most of the kids we work with are from low-income homes where they get used to doing things on their own. And this compares drastically to kids from high-income homes who often just expect things to fall into place for them, and whose sense of, you know, entitlement might frustrate us to no end, but whose sense of entitlement is the very thing that's going to get them to the finish line, right? Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, and we all know this. But I do think we have to work hard and intentionally to build this skill in our kids. So here's how far we've come. I tried to highlight one key point from each section too, but I think what I really want to do here, now that we've arrived at the end, is to punctuate the conversation with the reality that I mentioned at the beginning, right? So yes, our students are supposedly melting, right? 20% say they want to attend college, but then never show up. You know, but the question I have is, do we really know that they've melted, right? What if they found a better pathway? What if they earned $100,000 as an 18-year-old and college just seems silly to them? What if they got plugged into a job training program, right? The plain and simple fact is we just don't know. We haven't yet gotten good at sticking with our kids once they leave high school. And this means we really can't yet know whether or not they're melting away, so to speak, right? The only thing we do know is that the help they've had in their school buildings for years, is now suddenly gone. And too many kids just aren't yet ready for that kind of melting away of support. And I think, we all do what we can. And hopefully today you learned a few things more that you can do. I think, though, until we see real change in our system of higher education, this is what we've got. We've got our kids and we've got ourselves, right? And together we're both trying to navigate the chaos or inertia, depending on how you see it, of a higher education system, because we're trusting that it's going to lead to social and economic mobility. And I have hope that it can. I mean, it did for me, and I'm sure it did for a lot of you guys. If we could just keep this conversation going, I really do have hope that it will for everyone and every child who wants it. And that's it for me. Thank you so much. Please stay in touch. I love text messages. My cell phone is right on there.
Fantastic. I'm going to use Shamik's word. Stephanie crushed it.
Oh, did I really? Thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you.
No, it was just great. I so appreciate your time and energy that you put into this. The chat is kind of going crazy right now. People are saying thank you, Stephanie. But don't leave yet, because we have probably one of the best compliments to what Stephanie just introduced to us. And that is, as you guys know, we like adding things to your toolbox, right? So now you've got the knowledge, you've got the background, you've been introduced to the concepts, you got a few resources, thoughts toward those resources. Now we're going to actually give you things to put right into the toolbox. Excuse me. And so now I bring to you our friend from NCAN, David LaNore. That was my Oprah impression.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I must say, Stephanie needs to go ahead and take her offering, because she preached this morning. She was definitely preaching, because man, she had some points, boy. She had some points. She definitely did. Thank you for being here. My name is David LaNore. I am the Member Services Manager at NCAN, National College Attainment Network. I, by accident, already posted my contact information into the chat. I'll do that again later. But if you are not familiar with NCAN, NCAN is a nonprofit network that services not only nonprofit CBOs, but also we service K-12 organizations as well. And we have higher ed members, we have funders that are members, and ultimately we're here in the college access space to, well, I'll just read our mission. Our mission is to build, strengthen, and empower communities and stakeholders to close equity gaps in post-secondary attainment for all students. That is something that I think we all share, and I think that's why I'm here today. But also, I'm here to talk specifically about, I'm in front of you to specifically talk about summer melt. One thing I just wanted to come behind and piggyback off of what Stephanie said. Summer melt actually, I argue that summer melt actually starts at the very beginning of the application process. Don't hate me. Don't hate me. Those of you all who have gone through it, don't hate me. Here's where I get controversial, right? It starts with the fit and the match of that list and of who they actually apply to. Just being 100% real. That's where your first barriers to melt actually start, right? So I'll leave it there because there was so much that Stephanie had. You definitely need to chew on that. I am here to let you know she gave you good stuff. I was on mute trying to stay quiet. But so after saying all of that, I do want to mention that most of our students, whether they are adults or whether they are high school students, most of our students work off of social capital. So she spoke about peer mentoring and things of that nature, but I want to help make sure you know that you often need to make that introduction of that other person on the other side to that student. That is some of the most important things that you can do. That's why Stephanie and others who use the summer Bridge program are so successful, because they're able to actually introduce those students to someone on the other side. When they know that there's a trusted individual, that's where some of the summer melt actually melts completely away. I've worked in summer bridge programs where we were able to have 0 people melt, because we not only connected them to peers, but we also connected them to actual people in the building that they can trust. Here is the person you will be working with for freshman year. Understand this person's name. Here's their phone number, things of that nature. In visiting those things, that's what helped the most for my students. Now, I want to give you all some resources. There's a ton, and we're in the midst of remixing a few, but I did want to make sure that if you are completely new to Summer Melt, please, by all means, get the Strategic Data Project Summer Melt Handbook. It is from Harvard. You can Google that very quickly, very easily, right? In there, it contains a timeline for intervention. It contains 5 case studies of schools and programs from around the country, as well as replicable examples of exit surveys, school-specific checklists, general senior summer checklists for them to actually do if you don't have the money to physically be there with the students. An outreach checklist for in-person advising. If you do have the money to make that happen, you or your district. Assessment checklist for in-person advising, an intake form for in-person advising, as well as a counselor interaction log. Notice most of those examples include somebody being available. So does not mean you need to have a summer bridge program, but you will find that you have the most success when there's actually someone available, even if it's twice a week. Even if it's twice a week. Many of our members have even gone that far as to just have real, actual counselors texting those texts. Because these students know they get texts and emails all the time. Have you seen any of their inboxes? 300 unread from Old Navy alone? Come on, and let's not even go into the sneakerhead kids. That's a whole nother story right there. There's literally gonna be 3,000 unread. They don't use email the way we use email. I like my inbox to be at 0 unread or as close to it as possible. So they are the complete opposite. Complete opposite. If you have helped a kid fill out an application, you know, okay? We know it's a mess in there. So what we got to do is make sure that we don't become part of the noise. Stephanie was mentioning that to you. We are becoming part of the noise if we're just texting, okay? You got to double up. You got to triple up if possible to get to these students. Now, going back to my point of Summer Melt actually starting way before the spring semester. It actually starts way before the spring semester, but I do want to share this. I'm gonna drop this in the chat here. I do want to share that if we don't start it, if we start in spring semester, here is a great little calendar that NCAN has put together for you, not just for summer melt, but a lot of these things attribute to summer melt. A lot of these steps, if you are keeping track of these things, it helps your summer melt process a whole heck of a lot. Now, the best way to measure your summer melt, in my opinion, is the student tracker from the National Student Clearinghouse. It just is. Now, the National Student Clearinghouse has many different products. So whatever you and your organization can afford, I implore you to actually use it, because this can go far beyond just summer melt. Now we're actually talking about persistence. Now, I saw in the chat, I think Candace said it, a lot of principals do not care once we hit graduation. They don't care because they did their job. Whereas the rest of us, we actually love people. We didn't choose to make money. We chose to make opportunities for people. So not to say that principals do not love people. I just realized how that sounded. But a lot of them don't have the space to do what we do, okay? So in tracking these student trackers, you can find out who actually showed up to school. But if you continue to watch the reports in October and December, you find out who actually stayed in school for freshmen for the fall semester. And you can check back in February and find out who actually enrolled for spring. So you definitely want to make sure that if you can afford it, if you can find a funder to help you fund this, make it happen for yourself, okay? Please do, all right? So now, I mentioned texting before. It is helpful because it's an actual reminder to the student about different steps. Whether it is hey, your bill has come, it's July. I know you have a bill. Don't be freaked out, call me. Just that alone that response alone every year since 2013 has gotten a lot for me personally. This is just anecdotal at this point. So many students have responded to that, and I've been able to talk them off the ledge and their parents off the ledge, mind you. So that's another thing, with summer melt, you want to have that conversation, not just with the students, but also with the parents. Now, in texting, we know that this is not an exact science. This is definitely an art, because our students stay changing those numbers. All right. If you have the money, this is one of multiple services that allow you to text your students. Signalvine was an old platform. They are now Modern Campus. They are a vet in the game. They have been working with most of our, at one point in time, we had them as a sponsor, and we were able to offer multiple discounts to members for Signalvine, but we're not available to do that. So I'm not a rep for Signalvine. I'm just letting you know that there is someone out there. We actually have data that they work well. And I want to share, even if you choose not to use them, you choose to use someone else, there is something that we have for you. It is a text-based intervention sample messages, okay? So if you are planning to use it in a combination, you want to make sure that you use it in a combination. But if you're choosing to do that, please do that. And I've had members do this before. Instead of using Signalvine or another paid process, what they've done is they've used GroupMe or Discord or WhatsApp. Now, I know that those things are free for sure. You can use them. And actually the benefit of using these services is the fact that if your student changes their number 3 times during the summer, you don't have to worry about it as long as they downloaded that app. Not only can you get a hold of them, but they can get a hold of you. And they can, you know, if they lost their phone, they can get it on their tablet. So there's a lot of things that you can have for yourself in connecting with these students over the summertime. But mind you, most of these things need to be scheduled, if possible, right now. We're in March. Realistically, even a vet, I would start scheduling these things in March. You want to start these resources. You want to make sure that you, even on the back end, after college signing day, you want to make sure that you get that exit survey right before graduation. You want to make sure that you get all of their contact information and start. As soon as they leave the building, start reaching out to them about summer melt. Now, some things to consider in why, going back to just building off of why summer melt is important. Because of the fact that our students have debt aversion, because of the fact that there are a lot of pressure things, and like, let's be real, we've all had these conversations increasingly since the pandemic on why is college even worth it anyway, right? We've had these conversations. You want to address these things ahead of time. In addressing these things ahead of time, make sure that you let the students know that there are ways around things, right? If you didn't know, you can actually ask the school, can you defer a deposit? Don't let a deposit stop your student from going to orientation. Don't let that stop them from going to actually enroll, okay? Make sure that you have that conversation with the student and with the college. And addressing their debt aversion, I get it, right? But understand that if you can catch who actually is being chosen for verification, like Stephanie said, treat every student like they get in verification. That melt is ridiculous. During the pandemic, 43% of Pell Grant recipients were chosen for verification. And we have data here at NCAN over the past decade before that, and we're talking pre-pandemic, it went as high as 21% of those chosen for verification melted. 21%. Now, it stayed right around 10, 12%, but that's for the past decade. Now that verification is coming back with this new, better, FAFSA, better future, now that that's coming back, we have to be vigilant with our students to make sure that this, in particular, you know, the free money, if you can't get the free money, of course you're going to be discouraged. So let's please be aware that this is coming down the road so that you can help your student avoid some of those big pitfalls that they're constantly falling over. Did anyone have any other questions? I share all my resources. Did any of the links do anything that they
The
weren't
links were
supposed to
all
do?
good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Did everybody get the text intervention sample? I want to make sure everybody got that. Please let me know in the chat if it didn't work for you. I wanted to make sure, because if you don't have to write it, please. It's very hard to write. I've written it. Please use this resource. I've written these texts. If that's it, I'm done. Thank you for your time. Can you send a sample text? Okay, let's send it again. Because there was a lot I had to edit because Stephanie covered so much. That was you all got the full experience. You all think that should work.
And y'all got it for free. Now think about that, because if you to get this level of engagement, y'all had to pay a couple $100 as to go somewhere to get that. I'm just saying, keep that in mind. All I'm asking for is $35 for your dues membership. All I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I want to formally thank David because that was outstanding. I knew already, I sort of teed it up for you. I knew that that was going to be the perfect complement. And getting the resources that then supported what Stephanie shared was outstanding. I don't know if Tom mentioned this, but when you become a member of PCPR, you then gain access to NCAN. I'm going to recommend that if you go to NCAN's resources that David shared in the chat, it's a lot. They have an entire toolkit of things that you can go down the rabbit hole, and I did, of things that you can then implement in your program. So in addition to some of the things that he shared, there's also like some white papers in there that delve a little bit more into what people's experiences were and how people who ran programs addressed the issue. So I'm really excited. So let's give them that virtual clap, throw some things in the chat. It was really, really well done, and I so appreciate. Now, I do want to encourage, though, for you guys to ask questions. So if there are things, this is the time. You're running these programs. David mentioned to you, we're in it right now. You are on the clock, not up, not coming, right? You're on the clock. March is this time. The financial aid stuff is starting to kick in. Students are going to start getting notices. They're getting accepted. You know, all of these things are ever present and in their minds. So if you have questions or if you'd like to implement something in your program, let us know now. You can put it in the chat or you can come off of mute because we are a smaller group today. So use the raise hand feature and let us know if you have a question. I would like you guys to get the resource that you need now. If you want to implement something in your program, ask away. Oh, the chat is like blowing up with thank yous. Excellent.
And I will say, while the questions are coming in getting NCAN membership, you get free e-learning. You get free webinars throughout the year. And at this point, I can let you know, because this is where this is what I'm actually responsible for. We are actually giving you 3-4 webinars a month. Next month alone is going to be 7 webinars in April. In May, we're still going to fit 3. So we are here for you to make sure that you get everything you need as a professional. We have people who are in college access, college success. So depending on what side of the desk you are on, we are here to help you, okay? So just understand, there are resources out here. You do not have to figure this out on your own. Trust me, you do not want to be in that position, okay? So do not figure these things out alone. You are in the right place to ask the right questions with the right people.
Fantastic. Ellen did drop a question in the chat and Tom did ask her to clarify, but Ellen, if you are comfortable and want to do it audibly to make it clear. Oh, I see, she's following up. So Ellen said originally, any college perspective needs around MELT. Sure, just wondering how to collaborate best and what college admissions are seeing and hoping for more of. Yeah, that's good because both Stephanie and David made references to the college piece connecting.
Yes. So in speaking with the colleges, you literally need to take note of who's applying where, and you can, as long as you come with that list of students, I always like to verify, right? Because we know on college decision day, you may have had that student who said they were going somewhere, but didn't do what they needed to, but they wanted to look good in front of the school and saying, yeah, I'm going to Temple. Okay, yeah, but you didn't fill out any other paperwork other than getting accepted to Temple. And all you will have for Temple is loans. So what you want to do is you want to take that list and go to that rep and say, hey, I have these 10 students that said that they applied. I want to verify that. They'll say yes. Who got in? They'll be able to let you know who got in, who didn't. Then from there, now that you have interacted with them and verified their numbers and help them out, then you can say, hey, who can you connect me with for X services? So you know if your students, of those 10 students, 4 of them need the Office of Disability Services, they will connect you to the right person. You want to ask them for the right person, because not everybody in that office is the right person to talk about, getting your students the right help that they need in terms of tutoring or in terms of any of the knowing that you're taking your student to a PWI and saying, hey, my kid is a Black kid coming from a Black school. We want to have, connect them with the right people on campus. Are there any programs that they could be a part of? I was one of those students who should have been in a program, didn't know it existed, neither did my counselor, because my counselor didn't have that conversation with someone in admissions. Had they would have moved me completely over to this program that would have had me on track. But I had to struggle and lose my scholarship. But that's another story. So yes, you definitely want to directly talk to that person in admissions and directly ask those questions. 9 times out of 10, they will help you with everything you need.
Yeah, can I just interject also that Chris Walters, who's from Penn State, was on this, and he actually even spoke to this, and he dropped something in the chat about they do peer connection things, which also makes me think in the bigger, broader context of the discussion, Ellen, and I know that your amount of work you've been doing in this space for the years you've been doing it, you kind of know that you're probably just prompting us to talk about it. But we have to remember that we're working in a space that is not created. We're working in a space that's created because there wasn't somebody doing what it is we do, right? Remember, K-12 higher ed works in silos. They are not intentionally made to talk to one another, and they don't culturally talk to one another. Example was earlier. Principals, once they graduate the kids, put up how much scholarships they believe the kids still going to be getting, they're off to the next something. And then there is the colleges who are really kind of caring, but with our particular, many of us on this call, with the students we care about, our kids like a byproduct of. So they're not really trying to really. So it is about us individually being that advocate and finding that right person. Candace and Janine and folks have heard me say for years and years, you don't hand a student over to a college until you got somebody to hand them off to that you are comfortable to know that they're going to take care of your kid. Otherwise, when they're in that school, you should probably have some moral accountability to stay with them, right? Not just a job responsibility. Now, if your organization is fortunate enough to have a director of alumni that does that job, that's a great thing. But even in that, some people are just doing this for the money, right? So they're only going to do but so much. But if we really care about who we're servicing, we're going to make sure we know at each of these institutions that our students are being so-called sending them to, that we're handing them off to somebody that's going to take care of them like we would take care of them. I'm stopping there.
No, I think I always love these conversations between people in like nonprofit or K-12 space and higher ed, because there's this interesting like contention or dynamic that's happening right now, in particular from the pandemic, where, less and less students are enrolling in college. And a lot of organizations, at least in New York City, I would assume it's happening in Philly too, but there's a lot of organizations out there that are suddenly realizing it's not necessarily college or bust. There are other opportunities for students out there, right? And they're starting to do more career connected learning, job training programs, like really figuring out how to help our students get to where they want. Some don't want or need college, right? And so we're trying to set up programming that gets them to investigate who they are, what they want early on, so that when they arrive in 12th grade, they actually have a better sense of, oh, maybe I don't need college for this thing that I want to do, or yes, I do need college for this thing that I want to do. And so that's why I said earlier, like, we don't know if our students are actually melting, right? They might be finding other opportunities. We just, we don't have a national student clearinghouse for the kids not going to college, right? So we don't know what's happening to them, right? It's actually something that I've been working a lot on, is how do we survey students so that we understand their experiences and can then build programs that help support them in these pathways. But so while this is all happening in our space, higher ed is doing all it can to get more kids, right? And like, they're a business at the end of the day, right? And I say this with love. I love higher ed. My husband's an academic, and I worked in higher ed for 10 years, and I want my kids to go to college. But there's a difference between why they want their kids to come and why we want our kids to go, right? And I think because of that, there's going to be contention with these two entities, right? Like, we ideally want great things for our kids, but when your function is to run as a business, it's a very different set of causes and effects, right? And I don't know if that even addresses the question that we started with, but I do think it's really interesting to talk about how, we're trying to do one thing with our kids, while at the same time, colleges are doing the opposite. Like, they're doing everything they can to get these kids coming in a row. And then we wonder why they're not persisting. Well, hell, like, if I didn't want to be there to begin with, why would I stay? If I don't know why I'm here, why would I keep dumping money into this, right? So I'll stop there, because I could probably.
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole nother kind of a thing going on there. Because again, I still stand on, Steph, that I'm not letting colleges off the hook on this, right? Our students, right, from the gate, and I'm going to go back to what David said, from the beginning of the process, I'm going to go even before college application. I'm going to go from selling your institution to my student, who you're telling them to pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year to get to you, right? If you're not going to take care of them when they get there or on the process of getting there, it is my accountability, yes, and I'm being very parental about this as a professional, that I'm going to engage, and I'm going to make noise about it. If you don't treat my student right, I'm going to be noisy. And I think that's a space that we have to engage in. Otherwise, our students don't know how to do that for themselves. They won't do it, some will, but most won't, right? So we have to be that gatekeeper for them, and we have to be that person who's going to stand there with that sword and say, you're not going to do this to my student when you get here. You're not going to charge them $40,000, $50,000 a year and just let them sit here. Anyway, I'm stopping.
You were on a roll, Mr. Butler.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
I was about to say amen.
30 years in this space doing this stuff, because this stuff hasn't changed.
No.
Pandemic is pandemic, but guess what? That stuff was still going on pre-pandemic. It ain't new.
No, it's not, and I hate that it hasn't gone away. There was a moment in time when I sent 5 young people to the same institution, very diverse group of 5 people, right? It was white students, Black students, male, female, a young man who was Puerto Rican, and they all came home after freshman year, like intending to not go back. So I met with all of them to find out what happened. And unfortunately, it was like 3 to 4 different issues. So now what that said to me was the campus was failing in 3 to 4 different departments. One was roommate issue, one was financial aid, one was an academic problem where he couldn't figure out what to do. So I just kind of got fed up, and this is, I'm kind of like Tom. I wish that I only had one story like this, and we would be here for months with just the number of incidences that this has happened. So you've got now 5 different departments on campus that aren't paying attention, and these kids weren't upperclassmen, they're freshmen. If anybody should be getting the level of support, it's freshmen, right? So I did contact the university. Like, I got 5 kids, they're not going back, and you've got 4 different departments that aren't, effective. So until you can tell me something differently, I don't really feel comfortable sending anybody else there. And of course, they was like, oh, we're coming to Philadelphia to meet with you. And wait, what did, so. But that level of advocacy that Tom is talking about, I could have just sat back and said, oh, well, kids, we'll find you a new school or whatever. But there was a little bit more insistence and advocacy, getting.
And it comes down to being the individual, right? And it starts with us. We are the bridge, right? Developing programs and all that kind of thing is great and wonderful, but we are the bridge. It starts with us individually, 1-to-1, 1 to 5, our little 5 inside of our program of 35. It starts with us. And that becomes, if we're powerful enough and we're strong enough, it infects everything, and then things will start to change systemically. But we gotta live it. We can't just talk about it and preach it without doing it. So I'm saying, own your work, folks, own what you're doing.